I want to hopefully briefly speak on the radicalization of America. The radicalization of America. Now, it's quite interesting that in the past we used to always hear of Americans, gullible Americans, being radicalized, radical Islam. We constantly hear that in the media, but never did I ever imagine where Americans would be radicalized wholesale. I'm going to repeat that. Americans being radicalized wholesale. Now, I watched the video today of Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, and they were addressing the travel ban. I want to play a clip where in midway of their interview, and it's not really an interview, but right in the midway of that video, Rashida Tlaib started crying because of what happened to her and how she was banned from going to Israel. And her concern was more so of her parents and I guess what she felt her people experienced. And from listening to her and some of the testimonies of the females that were there, it's nowhere compared to what the so-called Black Americans had to endure. You know, they were talking about being kicked off of a bus and, you know, and they got emotional behind that. But the thought came to my mind was, well, you need to talk to a lot of our ancestors and even a lot of the older people that exist today where Black people were hanged just for looking at a white woman, just for whistling at a white woman, just for being Black. So, but midway while Tlaib was crying, Ilhan Omar made a statement. And it was quite interesting. Now, let me back up a little bit. They had a couple of white females that were standing in back of them, and a couple of these white females spoke. They said they were Jewish, okay? But I have my own thoughts and ideas of these that say that they're Jews and are not. But they spoke and they started talking about their experience, but they were reading from a paper as if someone wrote down what they wanted them to say. It reminded me of American soldiers that were taken captive during war. And they were given a script to read, propaganda to read, saying that America was wrong and America started an unjust war. That type of propaganda. So you can tell that these females were reading from a paper and what they were reading weren't their own words. I'm not sure if they were paid or if they were coerced into doing that, but you can look at the expression on their face and tell that they really don't know what they're getting into. They look almost afraid to even resist. And that's the whole demon crap agenda, is resistance. But I'm going to play this small clip and I want you to listen very carefully. And it went by so fast, many people more than likely missed it. But there's not too much that I miss. Listen to what Ilhan Omar said after Tlaib was speaking. Just listen.
That my grandmother deserved human dignity as much as anyone else does. So it is something that I struggled with, and I talked to Sister Ilhan Omar a little bit about it. There's a piece of you that gets broken, especially when I grew up here. And I grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country where you don't let anybody tell you you're less than or humiliate you solely based on your faith or your ethnicity. And as a United States Congresswoman, I could not do that to my grandmother.
And what I tell Rashida all the time is that you don't ever allow people to enjoy your tears.
She says, stop giving me your tears.
I say that all the time. There are so many people invested in our pain, in our struggle, in seeing us broken.
See us bow down.
And the one thing that is important to me more than anything as we fight for the most marginalized people is that we have our internal liberation carry us to external liberation. And there is no way. No, I told Rashida, before you send that letter, you should have called me. There is no way that we are ever going to allow people to tear us down, to see us cry, not, out of pain, to ever make us feel like our certificate is less than theirs. So we are going to hold our head up high, and we are going to fight this administration and the oppressive Netanyahu administration until we take our last breath. Thank you.
Until we take our last breath. We're going to fight this administration and Netanyahu until we take our last breath. She was telling her to hold her head up, don't let them see your tears. Now, to many people, they would hear that and they would say that's good advice. You have to be strong. She's talking about liberation. Now, when these four or these Congress women were running for office, I bet the people had no idea what agenda they had in store for you. It's just ironic that these four Congress females, including AOC, came together and radicalized the whole Democratic Party. They radicalized and they referred at far left, even to the point of talking communism. They want this country to be a communist country. And she's talking about fighting until they take their last breath. That's radicalizing America. Because now you have groups like Antifa, you have groups like Black Lives Matter, there's other so-called radical resistant groups that's rising up. Maxine Waters called that, demon craps when you see them out in public, harass them. If you see them at the gas station, Obama promoted resistance. Hillary Clinton promoted resistance. Nancy Pelosi promoted resistance. That's radicalization. Now, it's easy to talk about radicalized terrorists here in this country, but that's exactly what the Democrat Party is doing. They're radicalizing people wholesale. They're radicalizing, they don't need to cross over the borders anymore. Now, they may do it to keep you off balance. They may leave a couple of rice cookers or slow cookers in a subway station somewhere just to keep you off balance. But right now, they're dealing with the minds of weak Americans. They're radicalizing weak Americans. They got into their minds, so now Americans are protesting. They're now taking the place of these terrorists, the same ones that attacked 9/11. And it's ironic that you have two Muslim females that's heading this. Now, AOC kind of backed off a little bit. I think she was kind of told to back off. But for Ilhan Omar to tell Rashida that before she sent that letter, she should have come and talked to me. So now, is she the leader of the Democrat Party or the leader of the squad, as they call themselves? Why did Rashida have to come and talk to her before she sent that letter? And Ilhan Omar has no compassion at all when Rashida broke down and started crying because she's Americanized. You can listen to her voice and tell that she's Americanized. She grew up in the black community, as she said. And when she cried, the expression of Ilhan Omar was like, oh, brother, come on now. Don't let nobody see you cry. Be strong. In other words, we are at war. And black as well as white people, Christians and so-called Jews are being radicalized. A slow radicalization. The same type of radicalization where the so-called terrorists that come over here and leave pressure cookers or rice cookers or blow up the World Trade Center. Now you have homegrown terrorists. You have mass shootings. And notice the mass shootings always come at a time when the Democrats have no other alternative, when they're weak. So they have to cook up, no pun intended, they now have to cook up a mass shooting to talk gun control, disarming Americans, legal Americans. So once they get the focus and attention off of the fact that Trump is making changes that they don't like, they have a whole new agenda. And right now, America, or the bulk of America, is being radicalized. Americans have become the homegrown terrorists. And that's why you hear them talk about white supremacy more so now. And when they talk about white supremacy, they're not speaking in defense of the so-called black Americans. And right in the beginning of that video, they address themselves as women of color. They've taken the place of so-called black women. They refer to themselves as women of color. And then there's black women or African American women. But they've taken the title of women of color. So America is being radicalized by Muslims, by those same radical Muslims that you guys incriminated when you guys talked about radical Islam. Now you've become a part of that terrorist movement. Now I'm going to say, if this video is too hot for YouTube, of course YouTube is going to remove it, but it's going to be on my Spreaker channel, and I have the links on the bottom. This is also going to be uploaded to Patreon. You can also go to Patreon and hear it and share it. So if this video is removed from YouTube, it will be on Patreon and it will be on my Spreaker channel. And of course, my WordPress page. But this is speaking about the radicalization of Americans. Americans now, and see, that's why the attention and focus is taken off of radical Islam or radical Muslims, as they call them. And now it's placed on white supremacists, the radical white man that has now taken is now carrying the banner of being a homegrown terrorist. The white man now has become the homegrown terrorist, the target of being labeled as a terrorist. That's why they're pushing, and New York Times, it was just revealed that New York Times was having meetings about how they can start another whole agenda of promoting Trump racism. See, this is how they're programming and manipulating your minds. And there are Americans that are so far gone, they can't stop even if they want to. They become so angry and emotionally involved to the point where they start shooting up places. They start shooting up movie theaters. They start shooting up clubs, schools, because they've been radicalized by the media. By the media and by this terrorist propaganda that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib is promoting. And it's interesting that you have this immigrant female that's now in Congress causing all type of drama, hiding behind United States Congress, because by her being a congresswoman, there's places they can go. That's how much power Americans have when you're in politics. You're free to travel the world. See, that's why they're so angry, upset, because, there's been a ban on them going to Israel. They were going there to create problems. Just like AOC did when she went to California and started saying that the illegal immigrants are drinking out of toilets. But guess what? You don't hear too much about illegal immigrants anymore. Now the attention is focused on Israel and Palestine. So know their agenda and do not take part of this radicalizing of Americans, turning Americans against their homeland. Where would you run to? When America is destroyed, where will you run to? You're in the same position and condition that these young people that were caught and arrested, they were radicalized over the internet. And they were joining ISIS groups and they were caught and detained. But they changed their game. Now they're not radicalizing over the internet, they're radicalizing over the media. You have congresswomen that's radicalizing Americans, causing an uproar, causing protests, causing violent behavior. And then to show you how brainwashed people are, they're causing these uprisings right before your face, and then will tell you Trump is the one that's doing it. They're standing up saying resist. They're allowing you to attack Trump supporters and conservative politicians at their homes, and nothing is done. But then they point at Trump and say he's the racist. He's the one that's causing the division in this country. But the division started back with Obama. That's where all this nonsense started. Remember, before I canceled my other channel, I talked about how Obama went over there and trained the Taliban. They had American soldiers working side by side with terrorists, training the terrorists. ISIS, which they call now ISIS, with American weapons. ISIS has been America all the time. The terrorism that we hear about that happened in this nation, and I keep referring to the World Trade Center, that was America. No other nation can do what America does not allow them to do. How were they able, with all the security that this country has, how are they able to get this close to America? To blow up the World Trade Center right in the middle of New York City. How are they able to get that close? And not talking about the car bombings that took place, the pressure cookers that went off or that was found. How were they able to get that close? Because they were allowed by America, a radical section of America, the Democrats, allowed that to happen, and then they point the fingers over there. That's like when we're in school, you stand behind somebody, tap them on the other side of your shoulder, you on the other side, and they turn around, they think the other person did it. Well, that's what America's doing right now. So they're not radicalizing over the internet anymore. They're doing it through the media. They're doing it through these young Democrat Congress females, because they're doing that to gain the youth, that young blood. And that's why AOC became so popular, and now Ilhan Omar. But Americans need to wake up, because you're being radicalized by a radical Islamic group. In America, the Democrats and some Republicans got their hands in the mix. So feedback, tell me what you think, subscribe, click on the PayPal and the Cash app, support this channel. Until next time, I'm fearless.